Hello everyone, welcome back. This is episode 3 of Lorcana University. In today's video, I want to kind of pick up where we left off from last time, talk a little bit about the different colors and color pairings. I think we'll go more in depth with those a little bit later, but for right now, kind of want to address the real basics, and then also move into really kind of basic game mechanics, gameplay, and really kind of demonstrate kind of the basic steps of Disney Lorcana and how that plays out kind of turn to turn. Um, First, I just kind of want to jump into like the colors in themselves. Every color, right? There's amber, ruby, sapphire, emerald, and steel. So there's 5 different colors. Every color kind of has its own theme, right? And you want to look at the color themes as individuals' identity for the ink, and the ink that they represent. In Disney Lorcana, you can have up to 2 different colors in your deck at any time. You can have over 2. You're allowed up to, you're required to have at least 60 cards in your deck. If you increase above that 60 number, that is allowed. But when you do increase above that 60 number, that does sometimes lead to variation differences in how you will draw certain cards and how frequent you will see certain cards that you want to see. So always being mindful of, adding more cards to my deck than 60, that usually is going to decrease the likelihood of me seeing the cards I need to see. But again, it's your deck. It's what you find to be pleasurable to play, and add the cards to it as you see fit. We'll talk in later videos kind of about strategy, deck building, things of that nature. But for this basic video is understand that there's 5 different color types. You can have up to 2 in a deck, and then you can have 60 plus cards in a deck. But it requires 60 cards. And we've talked previously about inkable versus uninkable and kind of some of the basic stats on cards, but I really want to give just the basics of understanding of, if I'm going to sit down and start to learn this game, what is it going to look like? What will that look like step by step? In a later video, I want to talk a little bit more about the color identities, what those means, the pairings between 2 different color identities, and how that can lead to a particular strategy or a particular approach to the game. But for right now, let's just really focus on sitting down, getting some cards in our hands, and kind of playing things out and starting to have the fun of Disney Lorcana. So what I have right here is I have a 60 card deck. And inside of this 60 card deck is 2 color pairings. But we have emerald. Probably should have set this up more because these are all emerald. And sapphire. It's a current common deck. Again, we'll talk about deck theory, deck building later, but these are my color pairings. So when we sit down to play Disney Lorcana, we usually shuffle. Shuffle helps randomize the cards for ourselves. It also helps randomize the player across from these cards. There's different shuffling strategy. That's a whole different conversation, but just understand your main goal is to try to randomize your cards at best, and also your opponent to randomize their deck, so it can be fair, as well as you can find a plethora of cards. Because the last thing you want is to have 4 of the same kind of card in your hand at the beginning of the game, and you're sitting there going, well, I can't do anything with that card for a while. So randomizing your deck is super important for the consistency of your draw and seeing the cards you need to see kind of when you want to see them. So in Disney Lorcana, what we start off with is a dice roll. We sit down with randomizer deck, then we do a dice roll. The dice roll is to determine who goes first and who goes second. There's some inherent advantages to going first, and there's some disadvantages to going first. I guess we can start with that. So we roll the dice. We usually is a high roll of 2 dice to determine who goes first. Some places, some local stores will have other things. Sometimes I've seen rock, paper, scissors dice. I've seen rolling a d20. I've seen low rolls, but the standard usually is a high roll of 2 dice. So we roll, and then the winner usually determines who goes first and who goes second on the first game. If you go first, you are allowed to play a card first, which that means that card dries, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, first. but you don't get to draw. So there's the downside, where the individual that goes second gets to draw a card, gets to have more information in their hand before they can make that, before they make that first decision. So there's the kind of cost benefit dynamic to going first or second. We'll talk about this later, but there are certain cards that allow you to play a stronger card early, some of what we call the underdog cards. But that's a new mechanic that came out, I believe, last set, and really helpful, but again, not the purpose of this video. So again, we've now randomized our deck. We hand our deck over to our opponent, and our opponent hands us theirs, and we cut. Cutting the deck just helps to ensure that no stacking has been done. We can cut it in half like I do. Some people cut them in thirds and then do that. Some people reshuffle the individual's deck that they're playing with, and some do not. Again, finding what you feel is best for you. I usually go with a double or triple cut, and give the deck back. They give our deck back. So you start out by drawing 7 cards. And then, for the purpose of this video, we will look at the 7 cards. So, in looking at this hand, not well organized or randomized. So I have 3 9-drops, so cards that cost 9 ink to play, 2 4, an 8, and a 6. So I'm going to look at my hand, and I can engage in what we call a mulligan. And all a mulligan is how many cards I'm going to put back and get back. And the cool thing about Disney Lorcana is you can mulligan all 7. You can literally take your whole hand and go, I don't want the whole hand. Let's say I want to keep 1. I can keep 1. If I want to keep all 7, I can keep all 7. I get to determine how many cards I feel like I need to make my hand a better hand. So I'm going to mulligan all 7. And I draw 7 more. And then we look at these. So here we go. We have a better hand. So now it was a good decision to get rid of all 7 cards. So what do we do then? We put these cards and keep these to the side. We re-randomize our deck by shuffling. We hand it to our opponent again. We do the trading of cards. We cut each other's decks. And now we're ready to play. So in this scenario, I'll just going to be playing with myself to some extent. So I'll just start off by inking cards and playing cards. So I'm going to start off by inking, which is taking a card with this symbol, right? We talked about this in previous video versus this symbol being uninkable. And I'm going to put it in the inkwell. And the new rules state that when we put an ink for turn, that ink remains face up until the end of our turn. It's a new rule to help us understand when we inked and when we didn't, because sometimes that can be confusing, especially if we have certain cards, like I'm going to play next, that allow us to ink twice in a turn, just to make sure that we inked for a turn. So, since I have no card to play, I pay my 1 ink, and then I pass turn. So I flip this over and pass turn. Now the opponent will then do the same steps. They will ink and play a card if they have one. So then they pass it back to me, and I will draw a card. So in this scenario, I will long time before I can play that. And again, this isn't meant for strategy. I'm not, optimizing inks. Just talking about like the general strategy. So I'll have 2 ink available to play, because once you play an ink, right, I ink a card that has the inkable symbol, I then can use that right away, unless the card says otherwise. So in doing so, I'll be able to play 2, pay 2 for this card, which is a TPO card. And the TPO card says, when you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into the inkwell face down and exerted. Exerted is what I just did with this. I had to pay the cost, which means exerting, turning sideways, my ink, so I could play this. That's the cost. That shows I paid the 2 to play this card. But this effects allows me to take a card from my hand and put it in the inkwell. So, since I have 2 copies of this same card, and in the cool thing about TPO is TPO doesn't say it has to be inkable. It says take a card from your hand, put it face down in your inkwell. So the cool thing about that card is I can put a non-inkable in the inkwell. And if that's confusing, we'll talk about that later on a later video. But just recognize that certain cards allow you to do certain things with your inkwell and putting certain cards in there that aren't inkable. But for turn, you always got to put an inkable card in your inkwell if you can. You don't have to ink. We can take turns off of inking. If certain decks only run 3 or 4 cards in the inkwell, to understand that strategy, we'll talk later. But if we're going to ink from our hand at the beginning of turn, we then utilize an inkable card. So this card coming to play this turn, so it's what we call wet, which basically means the ink hasn't dried. You kind of think about you're a Lumineer, you're casting these glimmers, these cards into existence, and we have to wait for the ink to dry to use them. So when they're just played, they're not able to be used. There are certain cards that have the effect to be used. We'll talk about those later, but this one cannot be used. So that's kind of the end of my turn. So I pass it over. And here comes, this happens every turn, but I wanted to wait for this turn to kind of talk about it. The steps that we take is ready, set, draw. That is the kind of order of operations. So what we do is we ready our cards. We set, set is a step in which if there's any card that has an effect that takes effect at the beginning of the turn, whether it be like some cards called location cards that allow you to gain 2 lore. If those are in play, that's where we gain our 2 lore, right? It's in that set phase. And then the phase is draw. So ready, set, draw. I readied my card. I set. I've set things. I've addressed any triggers of card effects. Again, we talked about that later. The card effect is like what Tipo has. Any ones that are at the start of your turn, they will say that you may or must complete something at the start of your turn. If it's a may, you technically can miss that. So if I have a may thing at the start of my turn and I miss that, then I've missed that trigger and I don't get that. The must ones, it is not only my responsibility, but also my opponent's responsibility to identify must triggers and have them go off, because it's not a question if they can, they have to. So that's kind of a dynamic when it comes to the may versus the must. But just always remember, ready, set, draw. Ready your cards. Set off any triggers. Draw a card. So I've already done so. So what I'm going to do this turn is, again, this is now ready to do. I can quest with it, or I can challenge with that. Again, questing, turning sideways, gaining 1 lore. Challenging means take this card and I will use my stats to try to banish another card. Again, this being a 1/2 means I can do 1 damage and I can take 2. So if there's a 1/1 in front of me, I can banish that card, and this card will still live. So this turn, what we'll do is we'll play that card. So now I have 4 ink to use. I can use all 4, and I can play that card because it's an uninkable, but it's a 4 cost. And then I can quest and be at 1 lore. So see, in this turn, I let the card dry. When the card was dry, I can now challenge or quest with it. I played on the second card, which I exerted my ink, will pay the cost for the card. And now, at the end of the turn, this card, its effect, is an end of turn effect, which indicates I can take a card from my hand, I can place it into the inkwell, face down but not exerted, which there's some cards that you can have some in-step phases. We'll talk about that later, but I then can draw a card because I've done that, and that will be the end of my turn. And again, I'll pass that on to my opponent, and then I'll wait for them. So if let's say they challenge this card would be banished if it had enough strength to do so, to banish that card. But because it was exerted, I want to make this point real quick. Because the card was exerted, it now is opening to being challenged. If a card is not exerted, if I chose not to exert that card, it cannot be challenged unless my opponent's card specifically states that it can challenge readied, which is readies up and down, cards. Or they had a action or a song that directly affected the card I had played. So that's the only way someone can interact with a readied card, is a song or an action, or a character card that states it can or have an effect on a card, that it can challenge readied characters. So let's say I got my quest, I got my one war, they banished it, so it goes over into my inkwell. No, sorry, it goes into my my discard, and then start of my turn. See, I still have my. So I even messed up. I didn't flip over that card from last turn. I have my card, so ready. I ready my ink. Any beginning of turn triggers, I have none. This will go into this will go in, now be dry, and then I draw a card for turn. So this turn, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 ink, right? I can ink a Clarabelle, and I can play a Pete for 5. So I have to pay the cost of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, having 1 card remaining. And Pete's effect indicates that I can boost this card, which basically takes a card for 1 ink. I can pay 1 ink, take a card from here, the top card, put it under this card. And what that boost effect can do is its secondary effect. Next turn when it is dried, when I quest, I can look at how many cards are underneath this. So if there's 1 card, I can look at the top card. If there's 2 cards underneath, I can look at 2 cards. Pick 1, and then I can put the other one on the bottom of your deck, on the bottom of my deck. Again, how is that helpful? It can become a nice filter, draw a card, but right now, I can't really do much with it, right? It's sitting there on the board. It's readied. It's still wet. Can't be engaged with. But I could quest with this song, with this character, with my Cinderella, or I can leave Cinderella vertical and not do anything. For the sake of this, let's just say I quested this turn. Let's say then I pass my turn. They would challenge potentially into this card and may potentially banish that card, and then again we move forward with the ready. He sets, no triggers at the beginning of turn, and draw. And again, that's the basics of Disney Lorcana. So the important things that really take away from this video is ready, set, draw, right? Understanding the order of operations in the game. Understanding that when we have triggers, which are basically things that go off that are part of the card effects that happen at the beginning of our turn, and the card will specifically say that. It will say at the start of your turn, you may or must. And again, so the important things is the ready, set, draw, right? Ready your cards. Set off any triggers. If you have multiple triggers, they tend to go into the bag, which basically means in Disney Lorcana we have a thing called the bag. And the bag is, potentially look at the bag like a literal bag. And any triggers, say you have 3 triggers that go out on the start of your turn. Let's say you can draw a card. When your card's left, you draw a card at the beginning of your turn, additional card. One that gives you lower, and one that allows you to heal a card. They all go in the bag, and you get to decide what one of those triggers you pull out first. That's the cool part about this game is there's a little bit of order of operations because sometimes those things can affect each other. If I have a card that says if the card was healed and that's part of my onset, I might get lore for that. I might get something out of that. So knowing my order of operations and saying, if I do things in certain orders, there's a benefit to that. So again, just knowing those basics of the ready, set, draw, knowing if a trigger is may or must, right? Because that's important because if we can miss it, if it's a may. If it's a must, it's our responsibility to understand that trigger, but also if it's a must, it's our responsibility of our opponent to also help us identify that must trigger. Then understanding, then we draw the card, and then it's our turn to then do anything in order operations we want to. There's no specific stage for when we quest or a specific stage for when we challenge. Anything outside of the ready, set, draw phase of play and then passing turn is up to you. If you want to play another card or draw another card, for me, I put that Pete down and I boosted it. So if I turn it sideways, which exert it, right? If I quest it, turning it sideways, questing it, I then can utilize that effect to have more cards before I make a decision. I can ink then. I can ink before I draw the card or after I draw the card. I can play a card before I draw that card or after I draw that card. I have the freedom to make the choice, and that's pretty cool. There's not a specific stage for that in Disney Lorcana. There's just the aspect of ready, set, draw, freedom to do what I want inside of that turn, whether it be challenging, questing, singing a song. I want to demonstrate that real quick. That's one thing I forgot to do. Let's pretend I had this in my hand and I wanted to sing this song because this is a action, but also a song, like we talked about last time. Every action, every song is an action, but not every action is a song. Because this has a song of 4, so that means any character 4 or cost 4 or high, this is 5, can sing this song. Or if a character card says that it has singer 5 or 4, it can sing this song. So what all singing does is I let this and I exert it. So I indicated that this card is singing this song. And I exert it because it has to be exerted to sing the song. And then I can either choose, this song allows me to either choose my character or a character or location card of an opponent. Again, then it goes into the discard and this card stays exerted. So that's the singing. That's a unique aspect of Disney Lorcana is the singing aspect. So in this video, the takeaways of the ready, set, draw and how important those sequencing are to understanding readying our cards, setting off any triggers, drawing a card, and then you have the freedom to do what you want. Understanding the may versus must triggers are important and understanding what that means for us. And then understanding kind of the inking, utilizing of ink is important. Understanding that that card has to be inkable, unless a card allows you to ink an uninkable card, like I demonstrated in this video. But if you have any questions about the real basics and understanding of the steps in basic play, please let me know. Also, there's great resources on the Disney Lorcana website and Disney Lorcana app that go over rules and the importance of rules. If you're not in a Discord, if you're really interested in Disney Lorcana, please join one of the many Discords or Facebook groups in your local area. There's tons of people that can talk about card effects, tons of people that can talk about sequencing of your cards, tons of people that would be more than happy to work with you on building out from just the basics of ready, set, draw, and really helping you understand how these cards interacts with each other. So it's super important to connect a community. In later videos, we'll talk a little bit about the mental aspect of Disney Lorcana, and how mentally we can prepare for the game in maybe tournaments and things of that nature in the future. But just understanding that like those communities are important. They can really help foster early TCG players in mastering this game. Again, any questions or concerns, please put that down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Let's allow the